Hey guys, so today we are going to go ahead and do some gunpowder art. I have been messing around with gunpowder for about a little over a year now, and today I'm going to talk about the difference between gunpowder and black powder. I'm going to show you how they react differently on the wood and what kind of effects you can do with them. Before we get started, I of course have to say I am no gunpowder expert. I am just messing around with gunpowder myself with my artwork. Don't try this at home unless you have a fire extinguisher and all the necessary precautions to be careful. I am not liable if you do anything crazy. Just have to get that out of the way. I'm going to be doing this piece, which is a red-tailed hawk. It's a gift from my father that I have had in the works for a really long time, and I'm finally now getting the time to do it. So that is what we're going to be working on today. The first thing I'm going to do is the black powder, so let's jump right into it. The biggest difference you'll notice right off the bat is that the black powder has very fine granules that are not uniform, while the gunpowder has uniform, rectangular shape and size. Unfortunately, during this first part, I did forget to refocus the lens, so I don't have the initial burning of the black powder, but I wanted to show you the unfocused section because it shows how much smoke that the black powder produces, and you'll see a couple different angles in focus in just a few minutes. But this initial first burst produces a lot of smoke. It's not a lot of flame, but it's a lot of smoke. Unlike with gunpowder, black powder normally has to have at least 2 to 3 granules that are close together in order to ignite. If you just have one singular granule, it's very difficult to get that to light on fire. I'm assuming because the heat, it can't get hot enough to produce the reaction. Again, it does produce a little bit of a flame, but it's more of a burst action flame with a lot of smoke. It usually is more of an instant reaction. The biggest difference between the black powder and the gunpowder is that the black powder is very hard to control. It produces a very unique abstract pattern, whereas gunpowder is a lot more controlled. It also is black, so it produces a very different color, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. What I like most about using the black powder is that because it is very abstract, you get these really interesting patterns and designs that you may not be able to replicate if you're trying to be super accurate. It just produces this really pretty dust-like floaty cloud quality on the edges here. It just adds, I like combining black powder with gunpowder for that reason. Because the gunpowder is so controlled, the black powder here, these little marks and edges that you can get with the black powder, it just is not achievable with the gunpowder. But it is unpredictable, so sometimes I have ruined pieces with black powder, which is usually why I try to do it first, so that I don't waste my time on a piece and then ruin it with black powder. This is actually really interesting. Because the wind was blowing, it created this blow pattern that I don't usually get when I do this inside the porch. That's kind of cool. Alright, so you can see I kind of changed locations. This burn pattern is something that I've never actually achieved before. And that is all because of the wind, but it's not exactly what, I kind of like it for this piece, but it's not what I want up in here. I want the clean look that I usually achieve. I used to work on a glass table in this room, but I had to give the glass table away. So I'm not super thrilled about working on this table, but I've got my fire extinguisher here, so I'm playing it safe, and I'm gonna try to finish this piece off. The good thing about this room that I'm in, it is a porch, so I have all the windows open, except for the ones that are right next to me, so hopefully the wind will be dampened by this. Sit on the floor here. So I'm going to go ahead and try to finish off these feathers. I am liking the look of this effect. I just, it wasn't what I was expecting, and that's the cool thing about gunpowder is you will not get perfection. It's kind of a matter of just playing around with the different materials that you can find, and it's never the same. Every piece I create is just slightly different than the one before. Since gunpowder is much more controlled, you do have to spend quite a bit more time getting your lines perfectly right, because once it's burned, you can't change it. And so I constantly have to keep shifting it around. I find gunpowder is easiest to move around with brushes. That might be because I have my own knowledge or skill with brushes already, and so I find it a little bit easier. I noticed some people use carving tools. Some people use just a stick, like wooden sticks, wooden dowels, to move things around. But I just find brushes to be the easiest to get the cleanest lines that I want. Alright, so as you can see with that burn, it was much, much cleaner, much more controlled. And that was all because it was inside versus outside with the wind. I've only worked outside without wind. This is my first time working with wind, so this obviously created a much different pattern than what you would achieve by being in a controlled environment. And you can see here, it didn't even jump to some of the pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and heat those up and try to get those little pieces in there that I want. And you can also see the tonal difference between the black powder and the gunpowder. And you can really see the granule difference between these, where you see the actual granule with a little bit of smoke. And this, you can kind of see the granules, but you see a lot more smoke pattern with the black powder. This works really nicely for what I'm doing specifically. I'm doing a red-tailed hawk, so this kind of tone works really well. I'm going to add some burnt sienna watercolor to this most likely. We'll see in the future. I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to do, and it'll blend really nicely with this coloring that I'm getting in the wood. So again, it's all about experimentation. What kind of wood you're using and what kind of powder you're using really are going to make a difference on how the final piece is going to come out. I'm really actually excited about this kind of wavy burn pattern, because that I can play with that so much in the future pieces, especially if I want to do water or something that looks like fire. This was really exciting because maybe I can create this effect with a fan outside if it's not a windy day. So that'll be really fun to play with. I'm going to go ahead and finish off this other side, and then we are done for today for this piece. I'm going to work on this a little bit more, and maybe I'll do a time lapse as a bonus video this week. If I do, it'll be posted in a couple of days as a bonus video. When you're organizing them, you want the granules to be touching, in like if you want it to be one solid burn. The gunpowder is a slow burn, which you'll see in just a minute when I light this. It's a very slow burn that doesn't really jump. It might jump a small gap, but it definitely won't jump a big gap. And you'll see in this design that I'm doing right now that I actually have to light it a couple of times to get the desired effect, because some of the pieces are spread too far out. So unlike the black powder, it is very controlled. It's very easy to do it in small segments, and quite frankly, I prefer to do it in small segments. I know some people really like aligning everything and doing the solid burn at the same time, and while that looks pretty, it can lead to a really large flame and a really hot surface, and you are more likely to set your board on fire. Or even if you're using paper, because some people use heavy-duty canvas paper, you're more likely to set your paper on fire that way. So I like to do it in small sections. It's more controllable. It's more malleable for me, and I'm more likely to notice a mistake if I'm doing it in small sections than if I do the whole thing. The last thing I'm doing is just adding in more black powder around the wings. I want to give a movement of airflow as to really drive home the movement of the bird taking off from land. And here you can see that sometimes, like I mentioned before, when the granules are by themselves, they really don't light on fire. So a lot of this was a little trial and error as far as pushing granules together and trying to get them to ignite. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that like button. It helps me to keep making more videos. I will see you next week with an inking time-lapse and overview of how I take a sketch to a final drawing, maybe a little bit of an art rant in there. We'll see. So I will see you next week. Until next time, remember to create love and travel on. Bye!